Would it be fair to say you're the father of prepackaged reorganizations?
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
Okay. That's great. People use it all the time now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've always thought it was the best way to restructure. So I started doing one after another, and then I started writing about how we should be able to do them even quicker and get companies in and out in a day. And I know I've done more prepacks than anybody else because and it's funny, I think about prepacks differently than everyone else. I think a prepack to me is just figuring out a way to restructure a business quickly and inexpensively.
Yeah. So you were going to be a doctor, a medical doctor?
Yeah. I thought I was going to be a pediatric neurosurgeon, but I was young, so who knew what I was going to actually do?
A neurosurgeon. So instead of picking apart a brain, you're picking apart companies and people, I guess.
Yeah, and I think I'm better at that.
We'll be over at Wilbur Ross's backyard, if you will, his estate, which is on the intercoastal side.
I've been to Wilbur's home. It's a beautiful spot. As I always say, I knew Wilbur before Wilbur was Wilbur.
Hello there, M&A Advisor community. This is Roger Aguinaldo, and welcome back to the M&A Advisor podcast. Since 1998, the M&A Advisor's mission is to recognize achievements, provide thought leadership, and connect professionals in mergers and acquisitions for the purpose of improving your deal-making craft and accelerating your deal flow. We are so glad you're joining us for this insightful and inspiring podcast conversation curated for mergers and acquisitions professionals. Whether you're an aspiring deal maker, a seasoned professional, or just curious about the world of mergers and acquisitions, you'll find something valuable and relevant in our podcast. Our goal is to bring you the best insights, stories, and tips from the experts who've been there and done that, so you can learn from their successes and mistakes and take your deal-making skills to the next level. But before we dive into today's episode, we have a small favor to ask you. If you enjoy listening to our podcast and find it useful, please consider following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and subscribing to our M&A Alerts newsletter. You can find the links in the description below. This will help us reach more people like you and grow our community of M&A professionals. It will also let us know that you appreciate our work and want us to keep producing more quality content for you. Plus, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll always be in the loop with the latest trends in the M&A world to improve and accelerate your deal making. So please follow us. You are the reason we do what we do, and we couldn't do it without you. And now for today's podcast. Hello, M&A Advisor community, and welcome to an insightful episode of the M&A Advisor podcast. I'm Roger Aguinaldo, the creator and CEO of the M&A Advisor. Stay tuned as I dive into insightful conversations with top experts in M&A, distressed investing, restructuring, and corporate finance. You won't want to miss their valuable insights. This March, the M&A industry is set to converge in Palm Beach, Florida, for the highly anticipated 2025 Distressed Investing Summit. This premier event will showcase game-changing ideas, innovative solutions, and strategies shaping the M&A landscape with a focus on distressed investing, restructuring, and turnarounds. M&A professionals and deal makers can't afford to miss this opportunity to enhance their distressed investing and turnaround deal making. Capitalizing on the momentum of the landmark 2025 Distressed Investing Summit, the M&A Advisor podcasts continue to feature the industry's foremost experts, providing a platform for comprehensive discussions and insights that foster excellence in mergers and acquisitions. We're excited to welcome a distressed investing, restructuring, and turnaround industry expert and thought leader in this context, and it's our honor to introduce our distinguished guest, a 2020 Lifetime Achievement Award recipient and an inductee into the M&A Advisors Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are joined by Jay Goffman. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Good, Roger. Good to see you again.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Let me just give you a little bit about Jay. And, don't be bashful, Jay. You have a very long and accomplished career, but for the context of our audience, um, hopefully all of this is correct and accurate because we researched and it was all on your website. So,
Well, then I hope it is accurate.
yeah. So, Jay Goffman is a co-founder and co-CEO of Smith Goffman Partners, a merchant bank specializing in restructuring, which he co-founded with Steve Smith. Together, this dynamic duo, co-founders of Smith Goffman Partners, have restructured over $1 trillion in debt across virtually every industry worldwide. Nearly 40 years ago, Jay Goffman pioneered the concept of prepackaged reorganization, enabling companies to restructure swiftly and cost effectively. Their firm combines unparalleled legal and financial expertise to devise innovative solutions that preserve and enhance equity value, minimize business disruption, and, when necessary, provide essential capital to distressed companies. Jay earned his Juris Doctor with honors from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1983. And prior to that, in 1980, he completed a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Psychobiology, focusing on neurochemistry at the State University of New York at Binghamton. Ladies and gentlemen, we are thrilled to have him on our podcast today. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thank you, Roger. That was very nice.
Thanks. $1 trillion in debt. Is that right? Was that right? Or are you just...
Yeah, no, it's easily $1 trillion.
Okay.
The numbers, it's funny, when I first started practicing, the numbers were a lot smaller. Now you can get to $1 trillion.
$1 trillion very easily, especially when, everybody's borrowing a lot of money. So we have a lot of what we say emerging leaders, younger people earlier in their career. Congratulations on being an M&A Advisor Hall of Fame and Lifetime Award recipient. But we want to sort of go back to the beginning. So you're at SUNY Binghamton. SUNYs have, I have kids going to school right now. Those SUNYs have some pretty, for the best bang for the buck, I say.
Yeah, and that's how it was when I went to school there. I went there from 1976 to 1980. I honestly, I had the grades to go anywhere, but it was a lot more cost effective to go to SUNY, and Binghamton was the best one, so I chose that. And I was originally supposed to be a doctor, which is why my major was chemical psychobiology with an emphasis in neurochemistry. And what I discovered after 4 years is that I preferred to do something else. And so I quickly switched at the end to law school. I took the LSATs, went down to visit Carolina, loved it down there. It was a good time to be in Chapel Hill.
So
Michael Jordan was playing hoops and LT was playing football. It was a fun time.
Well, hell yeah. So that that was a good time to go. Now, you didn't know that Michael Jordan was going to be there, I presume.
Not yet, no.
Okay, not yet. He wasn't Michael Jordan then.
He wasn't Michael Jordan.
Right, he was Michael Jordan. It wasn't the Michael Jordan. So you were going to be a doctor, a medical doctor?
Yeah. I thought I was going to be a pediatric neurosurgeon, but I was young, so who knew what I was going to actually do?
A neurosurgeon. So instead of picking apart a brain, you're picking apart companies and people, I guess.
Yeah, and I think I'm better at that.
Okay, all right. So why the sweat? Well, first of all, was that what your parents? Where did you grow up? Actually, where did
I grew up in Long Island. I grew up in the South Shore of Long Island, in a little town called North Woodmere. Very nice town. Had an older brother and two younger sisters. My mother wanted a doctor in the family. She had already decided my brother was going to be a lawyer, so I was going to be a doctor.
Okay.
It was really, and what I discovered was I enjoyed spending time with my friends in college, talking about what they were studying, economics, business, law. And finally, I came to the realization that I would be better at doing that and that I would enjoy doing that more. So I made the switch, and it worked out okay.
Yeah, well, not that we need any more lawyers in the world. Wouldn't it be better if you became a doctor, or no?
Well, I don't know how good I think I would have been okay as a doctor, but I think I did okay as a lawyer. So either way, maybe my next career I'll be a doctor.
Yeah, your next life.
That's right.
So, okay, you're going into law. How did you get into, where did you start? So you're in law. Did you, uh, where did you get
Yeah.
your,
So I did well in law school. I was top of my class, law review, all kinds of good stuff. And so I had decided I was coming back to New York. I interviewed with a bunch of firms, and I ultimately took a job at what was then a medium-sized firm called Burns Summit. And I was lucky. You back then you rotated through various departments. So I did some securities work, some corporate work, some litigation. And then I got to what they called the bankruptcy group, which was a very small group with two partners and two associates. And I had never taken a course in restructuring and bankruptcy and creditors' rights.
well, that was just developing back then, right?
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
The code was just enacted in 78. And so we were in a brand new world where everybody was just figuring it out. And I was lucky. The senior associate in our group announced he was leaving the week I started. And so the partner looked at me and said, "You seem smart enough. Do you want to do this?" And I said, "Sure, that would be great." And I bought a horn book and I started reading. And what I discovered was I liked the combination. It was a combination of business, finance, some corporate law, some litigation. You got into court as a young associate, and it was just that combination of things, along with creativity, that seemed to play well to my strengths and seemed to be something that I like doing. So I got involved doing that. They had one big case at the time. It was called Saxon Industries. It was actually the sixth largest case in history at that time.
What year was
Uh,
this?
this would have been 1983.
Okay.
It wouldn't be large by today's standards, but it was large back then. And again, I was lucky for two reasons. One, uh, of the four people in our group, the other three shared a common attribute, which was they liked going home every day at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And I enjoyed working, so I would work. I worked till midnight every night, and I came in on weekends and whatnot. And so as a result, I got a lot of experience early on. And then because Saxon was the case, and it was a case driven by fraud. As a result of the fraud, there were significant net operating losses, and it was important to preserve those. The law was different back then. You could preserve NOLs if you did it right, but it required some math formulas.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, nobody on our side could figure
Yeah.
out how to do them. They,
Well, you were going to become a doctor, so I would.
well, yeah. So
You
my
would-
background was
yeah,
math and
right,
science.
right. Yeah.
My guys thought I was doing upper level calculus. It was closer to algebra,
Right.
but I was the only one that knew how to do it. So as a result, I ended up taking over large portions of the case. And when we got finished, I remember liking it. I liked the result. I liked saving jobs. And then when we got finished, the CEO of the company, Bill Schaffenberger, who was a great man, he'd come in to fix things after the filing, and he took me out to lunch and told me I had done a great job, and said I needed to get he needed to get me to a better opportunity in restructuring. So he set up interviews for me at Weil and Wachtel and Levin and Weintraub, and I interviewed all three places, and I accepted an offer to Weil. And so I was lucky.
Yep.
Had opportunities, I had people look out for me, and things moved in the right direction.
Now, obvious, not obvious, but back then, mentorship or people to look after you is very important. I think even more important today. Now, how did that happen? How did that dynamic start happening? Is because you knew how to use Lotus 1, 2, 3, I guess, at that time.
No, they hadn't invented Lotus 1, 2, 3
Oh,
yet.
not at that okay.
Look, I think
So
honestly,
you did everything like
I had an HP 12C.
okay.
I had a little handheld Hewlett Packard HP 12C, a pad and a pencil, and I created all the formulas by hand. And I actually always thought that was a better way of doing it, because if you're having to do it by hand, you really have to understand how it works, and
Yeah.
that gave me an advantage. But you're right, mentorship is crucial. It was back then. It is now. And I was lucky. Bill took a liking to me and looked after me. When I went to Weil, Harvey, I worked closely with Harvey and Corinne, and I learned a lot from
Harvey,
them. Harvey Miller, who
Yuri
is
Miller and Corinne
Corinne Ball,
Wall.
two of the legends in the industry. And years later, when I developed a relationship with Del Smith, who owned a company called Evergreen Aviation. He was a mentor to me. So I've been fortunate throughout my life to have great mentors who created opportunities for me. And that's frankly what I've tried to do for most of the rest of my career is be a mentor towards younger people.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's very important. Now, obviously, it's a two-way street. You ask for mentorships, but you also have to sort of provide something in return, in a way, right? Where you worked hard for
Yeah.
them, you worked long, you brought them,
Well,
besides
I w-
bringing them coffee.
well, honestly, I can honestly say that I worked harder than any person I know. I frankly, the years I was at Weil, I was in the office basically every night till at least midnight, one or two all-nighters every week. We were in 6, 7 days a week. I used to bill 3,600 hours a year, so
Oh,
that worked hard, but as a result, I got to work on great cases. I did Eastern Airlines, I did Texaco, I did Sunbeam Allegheny, I worked on Drexel, I worked on all of them. And you work hard, you get opportunities. And I also think one of the things that people appreciated is not only did I work hard, but I I think I was probably, and I don't want to sound immodest, I was more creative than most people.
well, that came
I
to the hard work, right? That you,
It came through hard work,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
And the working hard, you're reading things. Remember, there was no Chat GPT there, no AI to like summarize this stuff. You're actually reading and you're you're flipping pages, right?
yeah, you didn't have computers. Yeah, we didn't. Computers were brand new. You had a LexisNexis terminal in the library that you had to get permission to use, but you were basically reading hard documents and writing things by hand. It was hard and putting a lot of time and effort,
What
but
was your
I
motivation?
was loving it because I was building the career I wanted to have.
What was your motivation? What inspired you? Because and I want to put it in context of kind of today's sort of younger person who's thinking about a career and or in the midst of the career and they're burned out, right? They're working 47 hours a week. And they have to go to the office. I just a little bit, but there is a generational um, you know, dichotomy here, if you will, right? So are our younger people, some of the younger people may not be putting in the hours that I guess your generation or even my generation, did, right? Putting in the hours.
I think I actually think that's fair. Look, again, we used to have dinner in the office as a department every night together. So yeah, nobody ever left before 7 p.m. Um, but I don't know why I was more motivated than everyone else, but I wanted to work on all the best deals.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Were you
build.
competitive? Were you competitive?
Yeah, I think I was competitive, but in a good way.
Yeah. I mean, did you
I
play sports? I mean,
Oh,
did you
sure. Yeah, I played a lot of sports growing up.
okay, what did
Uh,
you
I
play?
I played basketball.
Yeah.
I played basketball. I played some football, some baseball, some street hockey. And
Okay.
it's funny over the years when I would interview people. In all the years I was a Skadden, I'd interview a lot of people, and what I discovered is that what I looked for was really people that were more team oriented.
Yeah.
You wanted ev We always knew we were getting the smartest people.
Yeah.
Everybody was gonna be smart. Everybody was coming from the right schools. Everybody was gonna have the right grades. You wanted the people that wanted to be part of the team, and that's one of the things I used to stress at Skadden is that we're really one team. We need to look after each other. You need. I didn't want people who were competitive with each other. I
Right.
wanted people that operated as a team and treated each other as family. And as a result, not only do I think we did better work, but I think people enjoyed coming to work, and you built real friendships. That's the difference. The problem in today's world, honestly, since COVID and people working more remotely, it doesn't affect somebody like me as much because I built my relationships. But if you're young and just going into any industry, the difference between going in and working remotely is the difference between building a career and just getting a paycheck.
Right.
You need to go in, you need to build friendships. You learn from being around other people. You learn from sitting in a partner's office and hearing how they interact with adversaries or clients. You want the ability to walk into another associate's office and bounce ideas off people. And you want to build those friendships because at the end of the day, again, what we do is important, but having friendships in the office makes all the difference. If you don't have any friendships, then you really don't have any ties to any particular firm.
Yeah. No, that's obviously very important. So when you're hiring people, you're looking for more sort of people who were stars on more team oriented sports like basketball or football,
Yeah, I
baseball,
wanted the guys that
and
could
not
rebound.
tennis, right?
I needed the guys that could rebound and play defense, not the
Right.
guys that just shot all the time.
Right.
But
Okay.
but it's also you talk about hunger, and that's the other thing I look for. Again, if you're lucky enough to be in a position where you get a lot of new business, and I've always been fortunate to be in that position, you want guys that have the same hunger that you had. So if a new deal comes in on a Friday night, at 8 o'clock, I want to know that if I'm calling someone, they're going to say, I'm all in, I'm excited, let's get started, as opposed to, well, I got plans for the weekend, let's talk about it next week. It's again, I used to tell people it's getting, I don't want work to be all consuming, and I want them to have personal lives and balance. But you also want the people that are so hungry to get involved in the good deals that they can't wait for the opportunity.
Right.
It's a
Right.
balance.
Any advice to younger people, maybe in their, who are maybe associates or become potentially on the track to become partners?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I used to. I've always told people to first figure out what you like. Make sure you're doing something that you really enjoy, and then figure out, you know, do you enjoy doing it in the setting that you're at? Because some people just are made to be partners at major firms, but they're not everyone. Some people are more comfortable in on the business side in private equity or distressed investing. Some people are more comfortable being counsel and something else. And you want to be doing something with your career that you're really motivated to do. Once you figure that out, then you want to try to find mentors, people that will give you opportunities to succeed, but you also want to build those friendships, and it's people both at your firm, but people in the community at large. I've always been lucky to have friends throughout the restructuring community, at my firms, at other firms, at investment banks, at financial advisory shops, at law firms. And then over time, as you start working more closely with clients, there's actually nothing wrong with your clients becoming your friends.
Yeah.
I've always been fortunate that a lot of my clients have become good personal friends, and it's especially important in restructuring because when you get into a restructuring situation, think about it. If you're dealing with a private company, so you have someone, he's built a company from scratch, spent their whole life building it, been very successful, and then something happens that causes a problem.
Yeah.
It may be something completely out of their control, something in the economy, COVID hits, 9/11 hits, something hits, and then you help these people through the darkest moment of their professional life.
Yeah.
And clients are smart. They can figure out pretty quickly who really cares and they're trying to help them and who's just trying to get a paycheck. And if they know you care and you provide good judgment and you go above and beyond to help them through it, then they become a personal friend, and then you can rely upon them the same way that they rely upon you. And that makes a career meaningful.
Yeah. So you're at Weil, okay, and you're lucky, unlike maybe some of your other cohorts who kind of, went through the corporate department first, and then realize, hey, I'm doing a lot of these turnarounds and distress, but it seems like you gravitated toward it very quickly.
Yeah, so here's the thing. So I spent the first 2 years at Burn Summit, did Saxon, went to Weil, worked a lot with Harvey. Then after a couple of years, actually, Bill Scharfenberger and I had lunch again, and he said, "There's something new happening out there. It's called distressed investing. There's only a handful of people that are doing it, but Bear Stearns wanted him to go there and help build a practice that did it, and he thought I'd be very good at it. So I ended up leaving the practice of law. I became one of the early distressed investors.
Oh, so you became a banker over at
I did, and our idea at the time is exactly what the
what
funds
year?
do.
What year was this? This was
This
mid
would
to
have
late
been
80s?
no, I would have gone there probably at the beginning of '87.
Okay.
And I remember that again, there were only a
That's right. The
handful.
the stock market crash at that was
That was
Friday.
that was in the fall, absolutely.
Yep.
But I remember our idea was we'd find companies that were good companies but had some financial distress. We'd figure out the fulcrum security, even though that term hadn't been invented yet. We'd buy it up, we'd convert it into equity as part of the deal.
You
We'd
you
use
you knew it you wanted to get the fulcrum security, you just didn't name it yet.
we came right. That name hadn't been invented, but we
Right.
knew you
So
buy it, you buy it where the value ran out.
right. So explain what a fulcrum security is.
The fulcrum. So essentially, when you're doing a restructuring, you have to figure out where the value in the business runs out. So let's just simple example. Let's say you have $100 of bank debt, $200 of bond debt in two levels, and then you have equity. And the company, so you have $300 of total debt. And you do your analysis, you do your cash flow projections, you do your valuation in the long term, and you figure out, okay, I can really afford to only keep $150 of debt going forward. I'm going to have to convert some portion of the rest of the debt into equity. But what percentage of equity? You do a valuation, you figure out where the value runs out. Wherever the value runs out, that's the security. If it's beyond the amount of debt that can be can be kept on the balance sheet going forward, but it's within the value. That's the fulcrum security, because in restructuring, that's what you end up converting into the equity of the reorganized business. And we knew that, and we were going to, and that was the plan. And Bear Stearns said, that's what we want you guys to do because you're going to make a lot of money. And then they said, well, really, you can buy debt as long as you sell it to another customer 30 seconds
And the
later.
fulcrum security, just to get back with that, is that the group that the ones who own that fulcrum security, do they have the most power in the
Yeah, that
Yeah.
absolutely, because when you're, and they have the most
negotiate?
power because if a security, if somebody owns a security and it's below that fulcrum security, it's out of the money, and therefore they don't get as much say in the Chapter 11 case. Now the issue is determining what the fulcrum security is as much art as it is science, and different groups will have different opinions, and that's where you get the battles in Chapter 11. But what it allowed me to do, I was there basically less than a year, and I decided I wanted to go back to practicing law. But it allowed me to think about restructuring differently,
Yeah.
because back in the early '80s, restructuring really was a multi-year litigation. A company would run into distress, find their bankruptcy lawyer, you'd file for Chapter 11, and then you'd start a 4, 5, 6, 7 year litigation process. And by looking at it from a trading perspective, I started to think it should be something different. It should be viewed more as a business transaction, the same way M&A deals were being viewed at the time, which was really a foreign concept
Yeah.
to everyone else.
Yeah. So I assumed you left because it's a long sales process, I guess, to kind of get there.
Yeah, no, what happened
This,
was
this, what,
what happened was Bear Stearns really didn't want us to be investing, and I didn't want to just be a trader. So
yeah.
I decided to go back to practicing law. I went back to Weil, and I did very well there. I like I said, I worked on Texaco and Eastern and Sunbeam Allegheny and Drexel and all kinds of great cases. But I remember one night, Harvey came to me one night, around 7 or 8 o'clock, and he said, "Have a big new situation. Very large company, does business all over the world. They got about $20 billion in bond debt that needs to be restructured, but we can't do it out of court because it's too widely held. We can never get everybody on board, and we can't file for Chapter 11 because the law outside of the U.S. was basically, restructuring law outside the U.S. at the time was basically liquidation. So if you filed for Chapter 11, the business would end up liquidating.
Yeah.
So he said to me, "You're our most creative associate. I want something new and different, but and
By 7 a.m. tomorrow.
well, by 7 a.m. by 7 a.m. in the morning, 7 a.m. I had a memo on his desk that described what I called a prepackaged reorganization.
Wow.
And I just said, there's a provision in the code, never really been used, but it allows you to solicit votes before you file. I have all the elements in. If you were in Chapter 11 and you could avoid liquidation, you had all the elements to be able to get a bond deal done with a small group and bind everybody else. And if I had my votes going in, I said, I bet we can get a judge to sort of give us first day orders that we need to keep the business rolling. And we could probably convince judges around the world not to liquidate while we were going through the process. Seemed to make sense to me. I remember he read the memo. He said it was very creative, exactly what he's looking for. We're not going to do it. We're not going to tell anybody about it, but very creative. And he told me to tear up the memo, and I did. But I thought it was a good idea. So a couple of years later, I ended up leaving. I went to a smaller firm there.
Hold on a second. You
Yeah.
came up with the prepackaged restructuring, prepackaged bankruptcy, basically, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And just review again what that entailed, like for the lay person, kind of listening in.
Sure. So here's the way to think about it. In many ways, if you have to restructure a company, the best way to do it is outside of court. There's no stigma attached to it. There's no Chapter 11 filing. You don't have to run into court. You don't have to waste time, pay all these other professionals. So you try to get it done out of court. But the problem is in the larger situations, especially when you have bondholders, and there were a lot of bonds because most of the deals in the 80s were fueled by Drexel junk bonds. You really couldn't get those deals done out of court because there were just too many and they too widely held. So on the other hand, if you went into Chapter 11, then you could use all the tools of Chapter 11. You only need, in order to bind a class of creditors, let's say a class of bondholders, all you need is 2/3 in amount and more than half in number of the parties in that class voting in favor of the plan. And in doing that calculation, you only count the people that actually vote. So if somebody doesn't vote, their vote
You're out
doesn't
of the
count.
class.
That's right. So but if you get the vote, you bind everybody, whether they objected or didn't object,
Okay.
whether they voted or not. So you have all the tools to bind bondholders, to get deals done, but you have to. But in a lot of these situations, you couldn't go into a traditional case because the companies, especially if they were international, would end up liquidating. So I said, let's pull the best of both. Let's do our entire negotiation out of court. Let's get a deal cut with the key players. Let's document in a plan. And
You're
disclosure
basically
statement.
getting all the votes.
Get all the votes, and only when you have all the votes that you need.
Yep.
Do you file for Chapter 11? And at the beginning, I said you needed 30 days in Chapter 11 because you had to give 28 days notice of the confirmation hearing. Later, I said, well, you can really give that notice pre-petition, and you should be able to get in and out in a day.
Wow.
But the idea is combining all the best elements of an out of court with all the best elements of an in court into a new way of doing it. And as a result, rather than restructuring companies in multi-year Chapter 11 cases, you started doing it in days and saved a lot of money, saved a lot of companies, saved a lot of jobs.
Well, that's and time, right? So you compress the time, right? You compress the time of when an activity or action is done, right? So I tell the people I work with on my team, just just get into action, right? Because when you get into action, that's when stuff starts to happen. If you plan, you could be months and months later, right? And then.
Well, 100%, and that's actually a good point. I would tell anyone that's going into restructuring, if you want to be successful, you have to be the one to drive the deal to the finish line, because otherwise deals just tend to languish. Everybody gets busy. You have a conversation, you talk, and it goes on and on. You need someone who's saying, no, we have to take this from here to the finish line. You lay out a timeline, you lay out a schedule, and you drive everybody towards the finish line. It's really the difference between people that understand restructuring and people that make restructurings happen.
Right. To just really be, so your memo, which Harvey Miller wound up tearing up. Now, why didn't he not use it?
I,
You didn't understand the politics around it.
I don't want to speculate. Look, Harvey is the dean of the bankruptcy bar. He's probably the greatest restructuring lawyer of all time. Smart as anything, a warrior in court. But this wasn't his model. Well,
Yep.
what can I say? I looked at things a little differently than he did. I'm not saying I'm better than him or anything. We just had a slightly different approach. And I feel fortunate I learned a lot from him.
He's looking down from above and basically, now seeing the things that you did. So you then took, then a couple of years later, you left Wild to go to Skadden. Is that?
No, I went to a Sullivan, Grave and Carable at the time.
Okay.
And that was a Cravath spinoff, and it was a smaller firm. But again, I was fortunate. They didn't have a restructuring practice, so they wanted me to start it. And since they didn't have a restructuring practice, they didn't know that when I said we're going to do prepacks, that they hadn't been done before. So I remember one of the first deals I did when I got there was a company called Memorex Telex. And it was a computer peripherals company. If you remember
the cassette tapes, is that the cassette?
That's right. That's right. I think it was Ella Fitzgerald or something, and she would go.
It's not live. It's Memorex.
That's exactly right. That's exactly. They had been taking private.
It was a great ad campaign.
It was a good ad campaign. I see. We all remember that.
Right.
But I remember they had been taking.
How'd they get into trouble? They made too many tapes. Nobody did tapes anymore. Went to CDs. I don't know.
The business itself was good.
Yeah.
But it went private in the 80s. Eli Jacobs took it private, and it was in an LBO, and it was financed by Drexel.
Yeah.
And they took on too much debt. So they took on a couple $2 billion of debt. So the business was good, but it was still too much debt. So we had to fix it.
So a lot of money was going into interest.
That's right.
Payments, yeah, interest.
And it was exactly it was the exact situation I was looking for. It was a good, solid operating company that had too much debt. The debt was there was one class of bank debt, but there were 5 or 6 classes of bond debt, in different layers. The bonds were widely held.
Who was the sponsor? Who was the sponsor? Who put down like $1 or something?
Eli Jacobs.
Oh, okay.
He's a well-known guy back in the 80s.
Or something. He got $1.99 of debt, right?
He got it was right. And then when Drexel filed, there were nobody left to refinance the Drexel junk bonds.
Got it.
So we looked at it, and the problem was like in the example I gave you before, Memorex Telex did business all over the world, and their bond debt was too widely held. So I remember sitting with the CEO and the CFO and telling them my ideas. And I remember the CFO said to me, look, I've been involved in a Chapter 11 case before. It's not going to work. I said, well, this is different. And I explained how it would work. And I said, it's called a prepack. And they said, well, give us some examples.
You named it? You named it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they said, give us some examples. I said, there are no examples, but I think it can work. And they didn't have a choice, so they let me do it. And we got it. We had great people working. And I remember Don Bernstein from Davis Polk represented the banks. I had Steve Kaplan from Gibson Dunn representing the bonds. And we cut it. We got a deal done. And then I remember the company said to me, but we can't just survive in Chapter 11. So I said, tell me what you need. We need to pay our trade in the ordinary course. We need to pay our taxes. We need to pay people outside the country. We need to pay employees. And all that was not allowed in a traditional case. I said, well, but this is different. So I just made up all these first day orders. And now, once we got them approved, then they became normal in prepacks. But back then they were, it had never been done before, but neither had a prepack. So it all made sense to me.
So would it be fair to say you're the father of prepackaged reorganizations?
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
Okay. That's great. People use it all the time now.
Yeah. I've always thought it was the best way to restructure.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I started doing one after another, and then I started writing about how we should be able to do them even quicker and get companies in and out in a day. And I know I've done more prepacks than anybody else because and it's funny. I think about prepacks differently than everyone else. I think a prepack to me is just figuring out a way to restructure a business quickly and inexpensively.
Yeah.
And there's every deal can
And
be
lawyers,
different.
well, lawyers didn't like that because you did it too quickly and the fees weren't as high. Or maybe
There are a lot
they
of
are.
there are a lot of people there are a lot of people that have said that to me over the
Okay.
years. And what I explain to people is, well, first, our job is actually to help the client, not to
Right.
make as much money. And I said, by the way, if we do this really well and we're quick and we're efficient and we can do these inexpensively, there's probably thousands of companies we can actually help. We don't have to make all our money off of one or two companies. And that's pretty much the way the industry has evolved over the
And then you
last.
went to Skadden to do a lot of those, I guess. Did you
Exactly
work
right.
with Jack Butler and Greg Milmo, or with it?
Yeah, Greg and I had lunch one day, and he said, we're thinking about revising our restructuring practice, and would you be interested? And look, Skadden was back then, and I still believe is, if not the best firm in the world, certainly one of the best. And they had the best Rolodex of clients in the world. And so I was excited to go over there. And I remember I met with most of the M&A partners, oh, before I got there, because they'd never brought a partner in laterally to an area where they already had an established practice
Yeah,
before. And I remember they asked me, they said, well, how are you generating so many deals at the little firm you're at and we're not? And I said, yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. I said, I think of it as a business deal, like an M&A deal. And they said, well, our guys tell us it's litigation. I said, well, that may be the answer to your question.
yeah,
And when I went over there, we just started thinking about it more like business transactions. And they had so many brilliant, M&A, corporate finance, what I would call leverage lawyers, people that did anything that involved leverage. And we started building that concept into it. And the goal again was to reorganize businesses quickly and efficiently. I remember the first week I was there, the only person I hadn't met yet was Joe Flom. And Joe, everyone will probably know the name Joe Flom. Joe's not only one of the name partners, he was the first associate at Skadden. He built the entire firm basically himself. He invented the M&A industry. But I hadn't met him, so they said, go meet Joe at the Regency for breakfast. And
yeah.
so that first week I went over there, I walked in, I went to Joe's table, and he looked at me, he goes, so you're the new undertaker. And I go, no, Joe, think of me as your cancer specialist. I'm going to take all your sick corporate clients. I'm going to fix them quickly and inexpensively. I'm going to give them back to you so you can do all the rest of the work. He looks at me and goes, okay, you can stay.
And then did you finish the lunch? Did you?
Yeah, we had a nice breakfast after that.
Oh,
I was glad he told me I could stay. That was
okay.
nice.
No, the Regency is a nice place to have
Mhm.
breakfast, to meet the name
Absolutely.
partner at Skadden. So how long were you at Skadden? From what years?
I was there from April of 96 until I retired in February 2020.
Until 2020, right before COVID. Okay, good for you.
It was literally, so I retired February 28th, 2020. Skadden was very nice to throw me a very nice farewell party. I
Okay.
started I started the following Monday at Rothschild as vice chairman, and literally less than 2 weeks later, the whole world shut down because of
Okay.
COVID.
All right. So, you retired from law because did you want to start a career in banking? Is that where you wanted to go?
I I I always felt that I was capable. I loved being a lawyer and I loved restructuring businesses, but I always thought I could do more also. And Skadden had an interesting retirement plan that allowed you to retire as long as you did before 62 and get a nice walkaway package. And Rothschild approached me and said, "Look, we know what you're doing over there. We'd like you to do it over here. You build relationships, you develop business, you provide high level strategic advice and judgment. And we really want to build up the U.S. and we'd like you to come in as vice chairman." And so I went over there, and I think it could have worked, but like I said, within 2 weeks, the whole world shut down.
Yeah.
And starting a new career at a new place during COVID and trying to do it all remotely on your iPad was a little
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's fast forward, and you did a couple of things in between there, but then recently, or maybe not so recently, you started your new firm. You're under your own, with a partner.
Yeah.
Give us a couple of minutes on that. What's your focus? What are you looking to do?
Yeah, so Steve Smith is my partner, and Steve's been a friend for probably 35 years. He was a lawyer at Latham, went on to DLJ, did great there. Eventually, when Credit Suisse bought DLJ, he and Ken Moelis and a few other people went over to UBS, and Steve became the global head of leverage finance and global head of restructuring. And together, we worked on Evergreen, Charter, GGP, Lyondell Bazell, and a bunch of other deals. So we knew each other really well, and we trusted each other. And Steve was just finishing up a couple few years ago. He had spent a decade doing private equity, and he called me one day and said, "Let's have lunch together." And he said, He wanted to get it back into more of the advisory business, and he was wondering if I would do it with him. And what we talked about was what we're both really good at is figuring out creative answers to complex situations. But in restructuring, especially, restructuring it's not purely legal, it's not purely business, it's not purely financial. It's a combination of all three, along with creativity and in some cases the need for capital. So we said, look, that's what's really missing out there is a firm that can bring all that experience and all those skill sets together. We could bring $1 trillion worth of deals and all that experience from a business, financial, and legal perspective together. We could work on the deals, which is something I really wanted to do. So we'd both work on the deals and get senior level experience. And we said, just like DLJ used to, we can provide capital when it makes sense, to help get through these situations. Because one way to solve some of these problems, especially out of court, is to provide some new capital and refinance businesses. And so we said, let's put all that together. And it's funny. At first, we thought we were going to basically be representing the owners of businesses because I had done that many times over the years. I did a bunch for Paul Allen, I did for Len Blavatnik, and a lot of other very wealthy individuals. Um, and we've done some of that, but we've also represented companies. We're doing some M&A deals. We're doing a large take private deal right now. We we're helping some startups. There's some venture capital types that have reached out to us and said before they invest into some very young people on a venture capital side, they want them to have senior level advisors help them. So we're seeing a real interesting mix of things,
Well,
and
congratulations. I mean,
it's interesting.
you are being recognized as a winner of the Restructuring of the Year, between $500 and $1 billion for the Chapter 15 reorganization of Affinity.
Right, and that's actually a good example of what the things we were talking about. Whenever I've done restructurings, I never worried about what laws we were going to use. Was it going to be Chapter 11? Was it going to be a scheme somewhere? Was it going to be an out-of-court restructuring? You figure out the business deal, and then you figure out which laws made the most sense. In this particular case, it was a U.S. business, but it had a Bermuda parent, and so for a whole variety of reasons, it made most sense to do it through a Bermuda scheme and then do a Chapter 15 to enforce it in the U.S. And so that's what we did, and it was a nice first deal to do as part of the new firm. It played out exactly the way we said it would. We worked hand in hand with all the other professionals, the lawyers and whatnot, but we think we brought some unique perspective and unique experience that allowed this to get done effectively. We don't call it a pre-pack, but that's effectively
Yeah.
what it was. We negotiated the deal, we documented it, and then we confirmed it in a very short Bermuda scheme and a 15 here in the U.S.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. You're going to be being recognized down in Palm Beach. How you've been down there quite a few times.
Absolutely, I love your event down there. It gives me an excuse to bring my tuxedo
Okay.
and get all dressed up. And it's always a great event. You always have great speakers, and the award ceremony is second to none. So it's a pleasure to be there, and we appreciate being honored.
Well, we love having you. I think I remember you coming down one of the earlier years when we started having it, maybe 2008 or
Yeah,
2009. I think 2007 we had our first year. We had, I guess, one of your old partners from Skadden, Greg Milmo, uh,
sure.
speaking, and then maybe you came maybe a year or two later. We used to have it at we would have it at the Winter White House, the JFK Winter White House. Did you?
I did.
Okay.
I did. They have a different winter White House now,
Yes,
but
it's well, we've had it there too. We had it at Mar-a-Lago, but now they charge. I mean, it's through the roof now what they charge. We're gonna have to start.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, no. I mean, listen, it's supply and demand, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
more. Not that I need any more money, but we'll be this year. We'll be over at Wilbur Ross's backyard, if you will, his estate, which is on the intercoastal side. So,
Yeah, and I've been to Wilbur's home. It's a beautiful spot. As I always say, I knew Wilbur before Wilbur was Wilbur.
yeah. Well, I
He's a
think
great man.
I think we had a hand in that because we actually recognized them for as private equity firm of the year, I think in 2002. So over
Yeah.
24, 25 years or 23 years ago. So I think we made Wilbur, or we helped make Wilbur was always
He might have had a hand in that
yeah,
too.
no. He did it all himself. But he was a good mentor, at least to us here at the M&A Advisor, and you being part of coming to the events. You've spoken at the event. The fireside chat we'll be having with you, and hopefully meet your partner down there and recognize you. I did want to, part of the topic is sort of what's going on in the world. Is sort of the restructuring of our government, Doge and what's going on. You have a perspective on that. Now, just to set it up, where I think Elon Musk and Trump is obviously delegating and then perhaps approving, well, with all the things that he's doing. When Elon Musk restructured Twitter, right? He did it very quickly, and he burned a lot of people. But supposedly Twitter runs better. I don't know if it makes money or not. Maybe you're gonna be doing something with that debt. But from what I hear, now that what he's been doing, that at least a lot of the banks have been selling the debt,
Mhm.
and there's been demand on that because his brand has obviously gone up. But any comments on that? And
Yeah.
with I mean, their standpoint is, look, this is a long time coming. I think throughout our entire you know, professional careers over the last 20, 30, 40 years, right? They've been talking about uh, cutting government, and their, I guess, Musk and Trump's viewpoint, and a lot of people outside of government is, you got to do these things quickly and fast, and it's going to hurt a lot of people. But do it very quickly and do it very fast, and don't have it over a long time period.
Well, look, I'll try to answer that without getting into politics at all, because
Yeah.
that's it's never good to get into politics on these podcasts. But I think from my perspective as a restructuring person, look, is there probably some waste in the government? Absolutely. Can things be more efficient? Absolutely. Every business I've ever been involved in could be more efficient. My experience is that when you get involved in a situation, it is important to move quickly, and it is important to take to make the hard decisions. But my other experience is it's important to do it thoughtfully, to actually do an analysis with of each business or each division or each part of the government, figure out what the policy decisions were originally behind creating these organizations, what value they provide, which people within that organization provide value, which ones maybe don't provide value anymore, and which parts of the business can be improved. So is it important to move quickly? I think it's important to move quickly, but it's important to move judiciously also. If you go back in history, in restructuring, there have been some people who, there was one, I'll avoid using names, but there was one restructuring guy, whose nickname was Chainsaw,
Right.
because he would go into companies and he would immediately fire lots and lots of people. And it worked in at least one case, and the companies reorganized. In another case, he cut, so many people and all the wrong people that the company ended up liquidating, and it was a disaster.
Yeah.
So I think I'm a big believer that you take the extra minute to do the thoughtful analysis. Especially, look, we're talking about the FBI, we're talking about the CIA, we're talking about organizations that are core to the safety of our country, and you want to do that carefully and thoughtfully.
Yeah.
And the only other point I would make is you also, I don't want to get into a big legal debate. You want to do it in a way that's consistent with a constitutional system,
Yeah.
and make sure we're doing it the
Yeah.
right way. Process is just as important as result.
So the argument would be that the media and the press are against you regardless, right? So you you gotta of course not maybe not of course, but this courts will potentially we're a country of laws, and they should be the courts should uphold whatever rights that they would have regardless, right?
That's right. That's right. And look, the
And
you always need balance in
all of
whatever
this is performative, like the chain, like you spoke about Chainsaw Al Dunlop, right? So you referred to him. I think that's you could Google, look that up, and he would go into companies and just basically do all that, and it would be performative, right? A lot of that would be performative, and just try to make a point that either the company has been wasting money, resources, time, and he had to make a show for his investors. So I think that's what we're seeing. But underneath it, I think you're right. You want to make sure whatever you're doing, you want to do it quickly and with as little collateral damage as possible, because you're always
Right.
going to have somebody's always going to be pissed off.
But you do have to look. I believe you need to take into account that the fact that, first of all, you're affecting people's lives.
Yes.
So if you decide you need to terminate people, you need to do it in a thoughtful. You need to take that into account, and you need to be thoughtful about which positions are really necessary and which ones aren't, and who's adding value and who's not. And I've never been a fan of the chainsaw Al type approach. I've had to do this with companies where you sit down with the owners and say, okay, let's do the analysis. We'll do it quickly, but we'll really do an analysis, and we're not just going to terminate everyone.
Yep.
We're going to terminate the people that don't make sense, and keep the ones that do.
Yeah. I was just only, and I know we're a little overtime here, but I did want to get your perspective, because it's funny that we're sort of and we should be thinking about the employees, and make sure that we're doing things in the right, responsible way. But I think there's, I don't know, anywhere between 32 and 38 trillion dollars of debt. I don't know the numbers. That's a lot.
We have a lot of debt.
Yeah.
Look, I remember reading Pete Peterson's book many years ago and
And
becoming
then
very
that's when it was like under a trillion or something.
That's right. Becoming very concerned about the amount of debt, and I'm still concerned about it. And I don't have a problem with anybody trying to address our deficit problem, but the deficit wasn't created overnight, and it's not going to be fixed overnight. And again, one thing I've learned over the years is do things in a thoughtful way. Don't it's better not. You don't want. There was an old MASH episode. This is a good analogy. I don't know if you remember it. There was an old MASH episode. A bomb had an unexploded bomb was sitting outside the tents, and they had to dismantle it. And so they had an instruction booklet, and they're reading it, and they say, first, they said, first cut the blue wire, cuts the blue wire. And said, no, he said, cut the blue wire, cuts the blue wire. And it says, but first, you don't want to be the but first.
No, that's I think I remember that episode. Yeah, no, that was funny. There again, I hear what you're saying. They don't have that much time to do this because, in a few months, they might, the world may turn against them on this. I've seen this happen over 20, 30 years where they have the good intentions and they come out with the report and this is what we're going to do and nothing happens. So I think the approach is action first and then let's see how the chips lie. But you're right. I mean, there should be some rationale.
You don't want to cut the blue wire, but first.
That is true. But as long as the you don't get rid of the guy who's holding the nuclear football, I think we'll be all fine.
As I said, just give me the nuclear football. We'll be just fine. Thank you.
Anything else that we didn't cover that you think we,
No, look, the only message I would give to people again is figure out what you love to do. Be, if it's restructuring, if it's distressed investing, figure out what it is, be passionate about it. Know what you're building towards. Keep your values. Too many people lose their values along the way. You can work hard and still have balance in your life. Try to enjoy what you're doing. Look for mentors, build friendships. If you do all those things, you look back like I do and say it all worked out pretty well.
Well, you're one of the most networked and connected people in this industry that I know. I mean, you show up at everything.
Well, I've been fortunate to make a bunch of friends.
That's good. I think that's good advice for all of those who are still searching. Sometimes they don't know what they're really passionate about, right? Just show up.
You have to show up. And look, it's important to be in the office and work in the office, but it's also important to get out of the office and go to these events like the M&A Advisor event or an ABI or a TMA or any of these things. Or if you're interested in charity, find the charity that you're interested in. Go out and be passionate about it. Develop those friendships and relationships. In the end, you never regret doing the things that you care about the most.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice, Jay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
It was a pleasure, Roger, as always.
And I'll look forward to seeing you and hearing from you in a few weeks. You'll
Absolutely.
be recognized for your transaction. Again, congratulations. And look forward to your fireside chat down in Palm Beach.
Thanks, Roger. See you in about a month.
All right, great. Thanks, Jay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new from it. If you have any questions or comments for us or any of our guests, please feel free to leave them in the podcast platform of your choice or send us an email at editor@maadvisor.com. We would love to hear from you and get your feedback. And if you haven't done so already, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and subscribe to our M&A Alerts newsletter at the links in the description or on our website at www.maadvisor.com. This will help you stay updated on the latest M&A interviews and trends and support our podcast to grow and reach more listeners like you. This is Roger Aguinaldo, the creator and founder of the M&A Advisor. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our M&A Advisor community. Until next time, stay safe and happy dealing.